welcome back to Rhythms of the Village for another wonderful West African rhythm tutorial. So this is the moment of truth. We finally got to polyrhythms that have different meters put together. This is sort of this mysterious, wonderful phenomenon that makes West African music so incredible and so special, where you can have two different meters happening at the same time and it still works. So we're going to introduce this today by sort of the simplest meter combination, which is 6/8 with 3/4. So we're actually going to start with a little math problem. So if you have 6 beats in a measure, how can we fit 3 beats into the same measure? So if you know a little algebra, okay, 3 times x equals 6, and obviously x is going to equal 2. So you can have 2 eighth notes for every quarter note. So if you have 6 eighth notes altogether, you're going to have 3 quarter notes. So ultimately, the number of beats is going to line up. The number of beats is going to be equal in the end, but the emphasis is going to be in different places. So let's just draw that out real quick. So we're going to put 6/8 over here on the bottom, and we're going to put 3/4 on the top. So remember that the top number tells us the number of beats that are in the measure. The bottom number tells us what kind of note value receives 1 beat. When the 4 is on the bottom, it means the quarter note receives 1 beat. Therefore, we're going to have in this meter 3 quarter notes per measure. So it will look something like this. Okay, those are your 3 quarter notes. So for each one of these quarter note values, I could have 2 eighth notes. Have a look at what that looks like. So there's beat 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now let's have a look at our 6/8 meter. So in this case, the top number 6 means that there are going to be 6 beats in the measure. The bottom number, the 8, means that the eighth note will receive 1 beat. Therefore, altogether, that is 6 eighth notes in a measure. So we usually divide 6/8 up into 2 separate larger beats that contain 3 small beats in each. So it will look like groups of 3 eighth notes together, and it looks like this. Let's see if I can make that darker. So you notice together that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eighth notes that have been divided into 2 groups of 3. 6/8 is known as a compound meter because you can think of it in 2 ways. You can think about 6 individual little beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you can think of it as 2 larger beats with 3 little beats in between. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. See why it's called a compound meter. So now the interesting thing is that you can actually fit the same number of eighth notes in a 6/8 measure as a 3/4 measure. Notice here, in this demonstration that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes in the measure. The difference is where the accent is. So I'm going to put the little carets over the notes that are accented. So if you think back and look back at our older tutorials, you'll see me put some of these accents on there. It just means that that's the note that is emphasized. So here are the notes that are emphasized in 6/8. So on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hear how I emphasized 1 and 4? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in a 3/4 meter, you're really looking at 3 emphasized beats. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3. So the reason why I have these accents instead of this one is that these are smaller. These are called tenutos, and they are just less of an accent. And so that's what gives 3/4 a little bit of a lilt to it. It goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But you can still hear how the beats on 1, 2, and 3 have some emphasis. So if I play these eighth notes inside, you're going to hear 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So let me clap those same eighth note values, but in a 6/8 version. You're going to notice that it's the same speed of eighth notes, but with a different accent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See how the accent makes all the difference to the meter? So now this is where it gets fun. Here, these 2 rhythms that we just played for you, this polyrhythm that's together, is played with a 6/8 meter here that Baba Anoche played for you, and then a 3/4 meter that I played for you. So let's erase what's up here and write down what we played. We're going to keep the meters up here. Okay, we're going to start with the rhythm that Baba Anoche played, because it's one that is familiar to you if you've seen our past tutorials. So, Baba, will you please demonstrate again? Let's count with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice how there's an accent on 1 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Compound meter, right? Thank you. And don't forget that that little tidbit, that little rhythmic pattern that he played at the very end is called the break. That's like the period at the end of the sentence. It tells us that the pattern is over. Kind of like the double bar in our staff. Okay, so let's write this one down. So I'm going to start with a note that's a little bit lower, because the first note that he's playing is actually muted. So he's actually holding the skin down with one hand and playing with the other. So you get a little bit of a duller sound. And then the other notes are open, which make a little bit of a higher pitch ring. So the first beat is going to be lower on the staff. And then 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6. Okay, and let's repeat that. I'll just draw a bar line through the whole staff. Usually when we are writing on 2 staves or more, where the instruments are playing at the same time, you're going to draw your measure line through the whole staff. So now let's write down the rhythm that I played for you on this drum. This is the one that is in 3/4. So I'm going to do this slowly and I'm going to count with you. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So notice that it's actually a 2-measure rhythm. The first measure goes 1, 2, 3. The next measure goes 1, 2, 3. So let's write down the first measure. That one's fairly simple. There's just one note per beat, right? Now you notice that the first note was muted. I'm using both hands and holding the skin down. The second note was open. And the third one, again, is muted. So I'm going to write the muted pitch lower. When we write quarter notes on the lower lines of the staff, see how it's below the middle line of the staff? The stem goes up. Okay, and then our higher note is going to go up here. And now our stem is going to go down because our note is above the middle line. And then we have a third pitch. Notice that I'm lining up the eighth notes. So the quarter note is worth 2 eighth note values. So you can see 1, 2. And here's the next one. 1, 2. And the next one. 1, 2. Okay? Now, the second measure actually starts with a syncopation. We are going to start on an off beat. In fact, an and. So the second measure goes 1, 2, 3. Let's say the ands in that. 1 and 2 and 3. Notice 1 is silent and we play an and. 1 and 2 and 3. So that first eighth note is going to be an eighth note rest. Remember that thing that looks like a little bit of a 7 right there with a ball on the end? That's your eighth note rest. Okay, now we have a note that happens on the and it's a little bit long, so listen to the counts. Listen to how many eighth note counts you get. 1 and 2 and 3. Listen to that again. 1 and 2 and 3. So notice for the and of 1 and for count 2, you can hear one note being held. So that altogether is a quarter note that holds over 2 eighth note values. And we're going to line it up with this eighth note right here. Let me write in the counts for you. So this is going to be 1 and then 2. So notice what is left. We have and, 3, and. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 eighth note values left. So see what comes next. So starting here, you have 1 and 2 and 3. So did you notice that there was another little eighth note value on the and of 2? And then there was another note on 3 that holds for the remainder of the beat. So 1 and 2 and 3. So we're going to need an eighth note value here and a quarter note value here. And again, I'm writing these as higher pitches because these are all open on the drum. And there you have it. While we're at it, let's go ahead and write in the counts for the first measure as well. 1 and 2 and 3 and. So notice, and I really tried to line this up well for you to see, that if you count the number of the eighth notes in the 6/8 measure, it does match the number of eighth note values in the 3/4 measure. So this provides a little bit of a conundrum when you're used to writing in a Western style, that being anything from Europe to the United States, and the system has been widely adopted throughout the world to write down and practice music. The conundrum is that we don't really have a very good way of showing these two separate meters playing at the same time. Usually what we end up doing is writing everything in the meter that represents the smallest note value. So the smallest note value in this case is an eighth note. So we would go with the 6/8 meter in both staves. So that would look like this. And notice, since the eighth note value is the same, you could still write the notes the same way. But then the problem is making sure that you can represent which beats are actually being accented. Since we're writing in 6/8, someone reading this music will assume that you're putting the accents on 1 and 4. So when you're writing it out like this, when you're writing your 3/4 rhythm in the 6/8 measure, it's somewhat clear in seeing that there are 3 separate little beats, at least in this measure. This one's less obvious. But to be really, really clear, you might want to actually write in the accents. And yes, I'm going to put an accent over the eighth note value. Even though you don't hear it, you feel it very strongly. Now, of course, this is still very imperfect. It's definitely an imperfect way to write something down that is perfectly possible for human beings to play. It's sort of the magic of music and the magic of this oral tradition that we have, that rather than just thinking analytically about this and thinking about, oh, well, what is possible to write down, you're talking about years and years, hundreds of years of oral tradition where people are listening to the music and thinking, this sounds good together, let's try this. And since you have many people in a different group and everybody thinking differently, then someone else could very easily be playing in a totally separate meter with totally separate accents from someone else and still figure out how to fit it together. So this musical tradition is a really great example of how the human minds can actually get together and come up with something different just by means of being together, being part of a more collective culture, and at the same time also raising up their different imaginations of aesthetic. It's really very beautiful when you think about it. Okay, so now that we've explained it, let's have you listen to it. I'm going to start with the 3/4 part, and then Baba Anoche is going to come in with the 6/8 part. Here we go. Thank you very much. Well, you know what? Let's try one more thing. Let's do it again for you, slower. And we're going to practice counting in 3/4, and then switch to counting in 6/8, and demonstrate for you how either of those meters can work when you're playing this together. Okay, so we're going to start out by counting the 3/4, and then as we continue playing on, I will start counting the 6/8 with you. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I'm sorry. I started counting in 6 already. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now let's try counting in 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, there you have it. And please join us again for another part of our polyrhythms exercise. Thanks for joining us at Rhythms of the Village. Bye.